Imagine this. It's 2 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling. You've achieved things. On paper, you should be content. But inside, something is off. You feel restless, hollow, like there's a quiet chaos lurking just behind your thoughts. You've lashed out at someone recently. Too harsh, too sudden. Or maybe you retreated when you should have spoken up. You don't even know why. You just felt possessed. And that's what terrifies you. You're not sure who you really are anymore. There's a darkness beneath your surface. Not evil, just unknown. And it's not going away. It shows up when you're tired, when you're triggered, when you're alone. You try to bury it with logic, positivity, distraction, but it always finds a crack. That darkness has a name, the shadow self. In this video, you will uncover what the shadow truly is, why it haunts deep thinkers the most, and how facing it can be the key to your most powerful transformation. You'll learn how the shadow forms, how it quietly runs your life, and how reclaiming it can give you back control, clarity, and wholeness. This is not therapy. This is psychological survival. Because what you don't own owns you. The shadow is not fiction. It's not philosophy for the abstract mind. It is real, and it's active within every one of us. Carl Jung called it the hidden self, made of all the traits we repress: jealousy, rage, arrogance, shame, desire, qualities we learned were unacceptable by family, by culture, by our own fragile egos. So we locked them away. But what's buried alive doesn't die. It festers, it distorts, and eventually it emerges. Maybe you sabotage your own success. Maybe you fall into patterns of toxic relationships. Maybe you act with cruelty and then call it justice. That's the shadow in motion. Unseen, unclaimed, unchecked. And here's the cruel twist. The more intelligent you are, the more you overthink. The more likely it is that your shadow is sophisticated, subtle, and dangerous. It hides behind your rationalizations. It wears the mask of virtue. It whispers, "You're better than them," while feeding your insecurity. This journey, the deep thinker's journey, is not about more information. It's about confrontation. The kind that burns, the kind that changes you. We're not here to destroy the shadow. That would be like amputating part of your soul. We're here to integrate it, to bring it into awareness, to listen, to learn, and to lead it into the light. Because in that darkness lies your most buried power, your repressed creativity, your true resilience, your raw, unfiltered self. You will not be the same after this. So if you've ever felt like there's something inside you, watching, waiting, sabotaging, calling, you're right. And now, it's time to answer. So if you've ever felt like there's something inside you, watching, waiting, sabotaging, calling, you're right. And the only way out is through. Downward, inward, into the mind's forgotten corridors, where the shadow waits, not as an enemy, but as the part of you that was never heard. And now, it's listening. It begins early. You are born whole, undivided, instinctual, full of potential. As a child, you scream when you're angry, you laugh when you're joyful, you ask boldly for what you need. There are no masks yet, but it doesn't last. Soon the world teaches you what is acceptable. Anger is punished, sadness is dismissed, pride is mocked, desire is shamed. You start to edit yourself, to fit in, to be loved, to survive. What's left becomes your persona, your social mask, and what you hide. That's the shadow. It's not just negative traits, it's everything you disown. Talents you were told not to pursue, emotions you weren't allowed to feel, needs you were conditioned to ignore. The shadow is not a villain. It's a prison full of suppressed selves. The irony? You created it to protect yourself. But protection becomes prison. And eventually, that prison becomes pressure. Your shadow doesn't vanish. It waits, feeding on denial, manifesting in whispers and impulses, shaping the way you see the world. Think about it. Why do certain people infuriate you for no reason? Why do you react to some situations with disproportionate emotion? Why do you feel disgusted by traits in others that, deep down, feel familiar? That's projection. The psyche abhors a vacuum. What you reject internally, you cast outward. You don't just dislike arrogance. You're disgusted by it, obsessed with spotting it, even when it's not there. But what if that reaction isn't about them at all? What if it's about the confidence you never allowed yourself to feel? The shadow speaks through exaggeration. It turns suppressed parts of you into demons on the outside. You become a puppet, and the strings are invisible. Worse still, the more you try to be good, the more vicious your shadow becomes. Why? Because perfection is violence. It denies complexity. It punishes anything messy, irrational, or vulnerable. And so, your shadow becomes louder, more chaotic, more desperate to be seen. This is the paradox. The more light you chase, the longer your shadow grows. But the deep thinker knows this isn't about morality. It's about integration. To become whole, you must descend, not with judgment, not to conquer, but to understand. Because in the shadow's realm are your deepest fears and your most profound truths. The desire you buried, it holds your passion. The rage you repressed, it defends your boundaries. The envy you denied, it reveals what you truly want. What if the very parts you were taught to fear are the ones that hold your power? But power comes with risk. Entering the shadow's domain is not a casual act. It's a psychological reckoning. Old beliefs begin to rot. Your ego resists. You feel split, unstable. You may even lose sight of who you are. This is the dark night of the soul, where certainty collapses, where your identity is stripped to its bones. But that collapse is not destruction. It is recreation. You are not here to patch up your persona. You are here to break it open, because only by losing who you thought you were can you become who you truly are. The descent has begun, and the deeper you go, the more you reclaim. Now, the descent is no longer theory. You feel it, not in words, but in weight, a heaviness that creeps behind your ribs when you're alone, the rising heat in your chest when someone touches a wound you forgot you had. That voice inside, the one you usually silence, grows louder. The shadow no longer knocks. It kicks the door down. You begin to see things you'd rather not. How your kindness sometimes hides a need to be liked. How your independence might just be fear of intimacy. How your ambition masks shame. These insights aren't gentle. They cut. They humiliate. But that pain, it's a signal, a call to wholeness. You're not here to be punished. You're here to be initiated. To confront the shadow is to step into fire, where false identities melt. You meet the parts of yourself that you swore you'd never become. The coward, the manipulator, the jealous one, the addict. You see them, and you don't look away. This is where most turn back, because it's not just uncomfortable, it's destabilizing. The ego doesn't want to die. It bargains, it distracts, it rationalizes. That's not really me. It's just stress. I'm better than that. But the shadow doesn't care about your stories. It demands truth, raw, unfiltered, and it will wait as long as it takes. So you sit, you breathe, you feel, not just observe, but embody. You let the rage surface. You let the grief shake you. You give space to every orphaned part of you, even the ones that disgust you. And slowly, something shifts. The monster in the dark isn't a monster at all. It's a child, afraid, forgotten. It never wanted to hurt you. It wanted to be held. The manipulator was trying to feel safe. The addict was numbing pain. The coward was protecting your heart. Compassion dawns, not pity, but deep understanding. You realize the shadow is not your enemy. It's your exile. And now, you're not fighting it. You're sitting beside it. This is the turning point. When the shadow begins to trust you, when it lowers its guard, when the parts of you you've banished for years begin to speak. They don't speak in logic. They speak in symbols, in dreams, in impulses, in unexpected creativity. That's when you know integration has begun. You write something you didn't know was inside you. You speak truths you used to swallow. You stand where you used to shrink. Not perfectly, but honestly. This honesty is your resurrection. You are no longer a fractured being, policing yourself into goodness. You are a whole person, flawed, complex, powerful. You can hold light and dark in the same breath. You no longer fear your impulses. You understand them. You guide them. You transform them. And now, a quiet clarity begins to emerge, like light breaking through thick fog. Not because you've escaped your darkness, but because you've become strong enough to walk through it without flinching. You are no longer haunted. You are now the one holding the lantern. From this place of integration, life no longer feels like a performance. You stop pretending. You stop negotiating your soul for approval. The masks fall, not dramatically, but naturally, like autumn leaves. There is nothing left to prove, nothing left to hide, because you have met your own darkness and survived. But survival is not the goal. It's only the threshold. The real gift of facing the shadow is not peace. It is power. Not dominance over others, not the power to control or impress, but the inner authority to know who you are entirely and still choose who you become. Before this journey, your identity was fragile. It was made of borrowed beliefs and hidden wounds, a careful construction of what you thought you were supposed to be. But now, your sense of self is rooted in something deeper, something unshakable. You are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. You are no longer addicted to being right. You are no longer controlled by the unconscious fears of a child. You speak more slowly. You listen more deeply. You choose your battles. You no longer react from pain. You respond from presence. This is the beginning of true self-mastery. And here's what no one tells you. Integrating the shadow doesn't make you more positive. It makes you real. It gives you depth. People feel it when they're around you. Not because you shine brighter, but because you contain more. You've held your own chaos, so you can hold theirs. You've wept in silence, so you can sit with their silence. You've faced your monsters, so the world's monsters don't terrify you anymore. This is why the journey of the deep thinker is sacred. It's not academic, it's alchemical. You've taken the raw, untamed elements of your psyche, shame, rage, desire, grief, and transmuted them into clarity, compassion, and courage, not by erasing them, but by embracing them. You are no longer at war with yourself. And the irony is, now that you've accepted your darkness, your light becomes radiant. Not because it's louder, but because it's true. People sense your authenticity. They don't know why they trust you, but they do. Because you are whole, because you are not faking peace, you've earned it. And still, the journey never ends. The shadow is not a one-time encounter. It evolves as you do. New layers emerge, new wounds reveal themselves, but you're no longer afraid of that. You've built the tools. You've walked the terrain. You know how to go down into the dark and return. That is the gift of this path. Not a finish line, but a rhythm, a sacred cycle of descent and return, death and rebirth, every time stronger, every time wiser. And one day, someone will look at you and ask, "How did you become like this?" And you'll smile, not with pride, but with quiet knowing. Because they won't see the darkness you faced. They'll only see the presence it carved in you. And you'll realize that was always the point. You've made it this far. Not because you followed a map, but because you listened to what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The shadow is no longer your tormentor. It is your mirror, your teacher, your truth. And now, you see how every emotion has a purpose, how every failure revealed a fracture, how every trigger pointed to something deeper. You don't flinch anymore. You don't blame the world for your pain. You ask, what is this showing me about me? That question, simple, fearless, is the language of the awakened. Because what separates the deep thinker from the wounded thinker is the willingness to take responsibility, not to blame, not to shame, but to own. Own your anger, own your ambition, own your fear of being seen. When you claim it, it stops owning you. That's what the shadow was always waiting for, not to be punished, to be reclaimed. And now the world shifts, not because the world is different, but because you are. You no longer chase clarity, you carry it. You no longer seek approval, you stand in presence. You no longer react, you respond. From a place of wholeness, people will notice it in your stillness, in your depth, in the way you speak with conviction or remain silent with intent. They won't know the storms you've walked through. They'll only feel the calm you leave behind. This is the paradox of the inner journey. The more darkness you face, the more light you embody. And yet, there is no final arrival. The shadow will return. It always does. In new forms, new challenges, new identities. Because life keeps unfolding, and the self keeps evolving. But now, you're not afraid of the dark. You welcome it. Because you've learned that the most sacred truths are buried in the soil of discomfort. You've learned that falling apart is sometimes the only way to find what's real. You've learned that healing is not about fixing yourself. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. And so you keep walking, not toward perfection, but toward integration, toward authenticity, toward truth. You become the architect of your own becoming, not sculpting yourself from what's acceptable, but from what is real, raw, unapologetic, alive. And in that rawness, you begin to meet others differently, not from the surface, but soul to soul, shadow to shadow, light to light. You begin to love not in spite of flaws, but through them. You begin to live not to escape the dark, but to honor what it taught you. And when the next person asks, "How do I begin?" you won't hand them answers. You'll offer them a torch. Because the path of the deep thinker is not to lead with perfection, it is to lead with presence, to walk into the darkness and return with the fire. There will be nights when it returns. A quiet heaviness in your chest, the echo of a thought you tried to bury. The old fear dressed in a new disguise. That's how the shadow speaks. It doesn't scream, it waits, patiently, silently. It watches how you live your truth, or avoid it. It notices when you betray yourself, even subtly, and then it whispers, "Do you still see me?" This isn't punishment, it's an invitation, because growth is not a straight line. Integration is not permanent. You will falter. You will forget. And in forgetting, you will be given a chance to remember, deeper than before. The world will keep asking you to shrink, to simplify, to fit. But your shadow asks the opposite. It asks you to expand, to feel the full range, to speak the buried truth, to love even the flawed parts of yourself. The cost of wholeness is honesty, and honesty costs everything you once used to protect your image. But what you gain is something rare. You stop performing. You stop over-explaining. You become still, solid, undeniable. You are no longer a stranger to yourself. And from that place of rootedness, you change how you show up, for others and for the world. So here is the final challenge. Don't just watch this and nod. Don't let this be a moment of inspiration that slips back into forgetting. Reflect. Where have you been hiding from yourself? What have you exiled that's begging to return? Answer that, not someday, but now. And if something in this journey stirred you, if it cracked something open or made you feel seen, don't walk away from that. Stay with it. Sit in it. And when you're ready to keep walking this path, to think deeper, to feel more fully, to meet yourself again and again, subscribe. This isn't just a video, it's a mirror, and the reflection you see is yours to claim.